To federal politics now, and a Senate inquiry has heard the final funding decisions from a controversial sports grant program were received by Sport Australia just minutes after last year's election was called. Let's take you live to our political editor, Andrew Clennell. And Andrew, the point here is that technically the government was in caretaker mode at that time.
Well, we're looking at this third round of grants potentially being illegal here, Ashley. That's the upshot of what was heard by this Senate inquiry into the sports rorts affair this morning. Pretty damaging revelations ahead of question time this afternoon. We revealed yesterday afternoon that on the 10th of April, one day before the election was called, Bridget McKenzie, the then Sport Minister, wrote to the Prime Minister with the list of projects she intended to approve. On the 11th of April, we revealed that list was provided to Sport Australia for facilitation. Now we learn from this Senate inquiry this morning that that occurred during the caretaker period. That is not supposed to occur, that sort of decision during the caretaker period. We also revealed that that note, that brief sent through on the 11th of April was strangely dated the 4th of April. Let's listen now to what was heard in the Senate inquiry on this morning.
So in relation to when we received the advice for round 3, it was 8:46 a.m. on the 11th of April.
Right.
Via email.
From
the Minister's office.
When was the Parliament dissolved on that day? Are you aware of that?
No, Senator.
I'm of the understanding it's at 8:30 a.m. or about that time. So if you received it at 8:46 a.m, we're actually in caretaker at that point in time. Were you aware of that?
No, Senator, I wasn't aware of that.
Ashley, the other thing that we learnt was that on the 3rd of April, Sport Australia provided its list of recommendations for round 3 of funding to the Minister, yet this brief of alternative projects was signed off on 4th of April, supposedly, then sent to the Prime Minister on the 10th, then sent back to Sport Australia on the 11th. Not much time in that process, considering that 76% of those grants that were approved were different to the Sport Australia recommendations and list. I might also point out that the government knew at this time, and had known since February, the Audit Office was investigating this program after candidate Georgina Downer had announced a grant, and the opposition had written to the Audit Office saying, why are candidates announcing these grants? Let's have a listen to what the inquiry heard around this 3rd of April list and the Minister having this parallel process.
My understanding is that we received a list back from the Minister with the projects that were approved.
And that was different to what you had sent up on the 3rd?
That's
right.
Correct.
We know that on the... How different? Can you say that? Was there major changes to the list that you had?
I'd have to take that on notice, Senator. I don't know exactly how many of those particular grants.
Okay.
You're asking how many grants were
changed.
Yeah. A
simple answer of what the difference was numerically between the 3rd of the 4th and the 11th of the 4th would be useful.
I do have that, Senator.
Okay.
61 were those that were originally recommended.
Out of?
228 projects that were approved.
61 of the 228 grants were the same as the department's list. The department gives the Minister the list of 3rd of April. She produces an entirely different list, supposedly on the 4th of April, goes to the Prime Minister 10th of April, calls the election 11th of April, list given to Sport Australia in the caretaker period 11th of April. This is all pretty damaging stuff, Ashley.
It's a damning timeline, Andrew. If the government thought that with the Minister's resignation this story would disappear, it was very wrong. Where do you see it going from here?
Well, we'll hear evidence from Bridget McKenzie, for example, in the Senate inquiry soon enough, and Phil Gaetjens, who prepared the report about the Minister which saw her departure. So I think there's a fair bit to run yet.
Sounds like it. Andrew Clennell will be watching closely, of course. Thanks for that.